Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Transformation Talk. I am here with my friend and a most amazing woman, Julie Daley. Thanks for being here, Julie.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for having me.
And Julie is a writer, a teacher, a transformational coach, and a creativity catalyst. And you can find her at unabashedlyfemale.com. And of course, her bio is below with all of her relevant links, so you can find her after this. Julie and I met shortly after I started blogging in 2009, and when I decided to do this Transformation Talk series, Julie's name was at the top of my list because she has known grief intimately and was one of the people who helped support me in just beautiful ways after Benjamin was stillborn. So I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here too, and it's so nice to see your face. It's been too long, and it's really nice to connect with you and with your listeners.
Thank you. Yeah, I know I wish we lived closer to each other, but
it just makes it all the sweeter when we do get to see each other in flesh and blood, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Okay, so I want to jump in. And you on your about page on your blog, you talk about having your first child at 17 and being widowed at 38.
Yes.
And that was obviously a big life changer for you when your husband died. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Sure. It's been 17 years now, so it's been a long time. And grief is funny in how it occasionally pops up still, but it pops up in ways that are really more sweet. Sweet memories of him, and it feels like so long ago. Mm-hmm. And yet I'll see his picture and it'll be like, oh, I remember that man. He died so suddenly, and the death was difficult to watch. So initially, I was in so much shock. I think that would be the way to describe it initially. And so much searing pain in my heart because I loved him so much. And he died of a heart attack. And so there was a lot around the heart that I experienced. One of the big things that I would say looking back on the experience was how alive I felt and how beautiful the experience of deep grief is and was. And at the time it felt so funny to say that. It was like, logically doesn't fit for me. But the experience of it was so searingly beautiful. To love somebody that much, it's just another pathway of love to grieve their passing so deeply. And it was very hard to let go of him because I'd known him from when I was so young. So a lot of it was the beginning of my own individuation process, really. Finding my own feet, learning how to be in the world by myself. My kids were pretty much grown, although my younger daughter was 16, so there was still a lot for her to go through. So I think those two things, the beauty of the grief process, the beauty of missing him so much, the beauty of letting him go, and the pain of that, of really letting him go, and finding my own autonomy. And then some of the difficulties of everyday life without him being here, weddings, my daughter's weddings, the births of my 4 grandchildren, the everyday moments, the holidays when he's not here, or even today, as I was just telling you, the family pet that my daughter had to put to sleep this morning. And she was 22 years old, this cat, so she was alive when he was alive, and it was another marker somehow of that, They're never logical things, but somewhere deep inside something gets awakened or felt. The best way to describe it.
Wow, what a beautiful way to talk about it. Thank you.
It's so interesting. In the beginning, it was like I just wanted to push it away. I don't want to feel this. I don't want this to be true. Just bring him back. I will do anything to bring him back. Anything to when you really move through it, to this too. You know, this too is part of life. Death is part of life. Grief is part of love. You can't have one without the other. They all go together. So I think that's been the real path of acceptance, is this too.
And do you have any recollection of how long it took you to sort of come to that place of acceptance with it, to that place of recognizing that you needed to be present with it and that it was beautiful, even as it was painful?
The very last part of your question, no, I don't remember when that moment was. But two things popped up as you asked me the question, the first part of it. After 5 years, I suddenly woke up one morning and said, I want to date again. And I had no interest for 5 years plus. You know, it's just like, I just assumed it would not be a part of my life. And then suddenly something woke up and was like, oh, I want to. And then 7 years, and I remember this really clearly, it was like, for some reason, I know I was reading Women Who Run with the Wolves, and I had just had a little bit of a breakup with somebody that I thought might be more. And so I was really looking at me and my place in the world, and I realized how much I had come to identify as a widow. It's like, oh my gosh, I see myself as a widow. And I realized how that was limiting me. That his death had been something I experienced. And it's amazing how we can grab a hold of a new identity when something happens. And suddenly now I'm a widow, and that informs what my life is going to be like, how much I get to experience, what I'll let in, what I won't let in, what I tell people about myself. And in that recognition, I realized I wanted to let it go. And I did. It was like, it's sort of like when you see it, how it just sort of pops. And that opened me up to so much more life again. It was like, that happened to me, but that's not what I am.
Right.
You know? Huge difference in how I began to approach life.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, that makes so much sense to me. Because that's something that I've really grappled with myself as I've moved through the acute grief of Ben's stillbirth, and just sort of define, how do I want to define myself? And I've never felt really comfortable defining myself as, or having that be the definition of who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, that discomfort with it. I think for me, ultimately, it was because it wasn't really true.
Yeah. Yeah. We're so big. There's so much more to us.
Right, exactly, right? Something in us knows that it's not really true that that's what I am.
Yeah.
At least that's what my experience was. And so as soon as I was willing to see that and let go of the things that I thought I was getting from attaching to that, and seeing that it was really rather limiting than freeing, then it was like, oh, okay.
Wow, I love that. They sound like two really clear moments of sort of awakening within the grief process.
Yes, very much so. And in awakening as a woman that wants to be in relationship.
Right.
You know, so I want to date, and I am not just a widow.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course it helped in the dating process, because I found myself talking less about my late husband, which is makes it a little easier when you're trying to meet somebody.
Yes, I would imagine so. Well, and you were still so young. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, 7 years was 45, right? It was 45 when I started doing all these new things.
And that's what you say on your blog is you say, or on your website, that you started dancing and writing at 45. And I was going to ask you what happened at 45. So can you talk a little bit more about sort of how that process worked?
Yeah, there was, I think, in the freedom of seeing through that, attaching to that identity. And it was probably more than that too. You know, I was reading women, like I said, Women Who Run with the Wolves. There was something that was wanting to come forth that was like more soul oriented, more passionate. Something that had really been pushed down during those years of grief, that began to bubble up, and it came up through writing. There was just this urge to start writing, and I said I'd never want to be a writer. Well, that was one thing as a kid. I will never be a writer. Never, never, never be a writer. Suddenly I'm writing poetry, writing a book, writing blogs, and the other thing was dancing. I started doing the 5 Rhythms, and oh my gosh, 10 years later, actually the founder of 5 Rhythms just passed away last week, Gabrielle Raw. Mm-hmm. And it took me back to that moment when I started to dance, when I found the practice, because I felt so much gratitude. This practice is an amazing practice, and still to this day, I think it's been 30 years since she brought it forth, maybe more. A lot of people don't know, they don't get it, they don't understand it. And I thought, what courage it takes to bring forth something into the world that people don't get, and yet to keep moving with it. And I bring that up here because I think at that time, 7 years after his death, that's what was coming forth in me, was this new work. I had just gotten out of Stanford with my degree. I used to be a systems analyst. The degree was in computer science and some design, but it definitely wasn't a degree that would lead me to what the work was I was ultimately meant to do. So there was just something that came forth that just said, I will not be denied any longer.
Wow. And so you were still, even though those things were saying I need to be expressed, you were still working in computers.
No.
Oh, that's when you switched.
I really, after that Stanford, I just had like a really deep dark night of the soul. My grandson was born with a heart defect, was critical for a month, was in the NICU for 3 months, had 20 full surgeries his first year, open heart surgery, brain surgery, lung surgery, 5 brain surgeries. It was awful. It was just awful. Everything's out of your hands. Everything. Yeah. All you can do is pray. And so I just spent a year. I felt like I was completely lost. Completely lost. I had no idea. I ended up selling my house. I kept applying for jobs, but I didn't really want them. I had no idea. I just had no idea. And then suddenly I saw this course to teach creativity in business, to become a teacher trainer, or a teacher of it. And there was a teacher training. And it was like, oh, I want to do that. Right? Just a little bit of like a spark. And so I followed that, and that led me to where I am now.
Wow, it's amazing. Amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
I can't even imagine you as like office job, computers, business. I just can't even.
In a bank. Data massaging. I love data massage, like taking data strings and breaking them up, and I really love that. And I always love math, so I'm very much left brain too. I love that, and it's not my passion.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, and to really let yourself be lost, I think, is a big, important piece. Like for me, I tried to deny that I was lost. And yet there was no juice for anything. It was so clear. It's like, I can't deny this. It's just no juice. And it wasn't like not wanting to live. It wasn't that. It was just being in the dark, or being in the desert, or being, whatever metaphor you want to give to it. There's just nothing to grab a hold of. And there's like a waiting.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I know that sometimes, in our culture, it's like, well, I've got to keep moving, I've got to keep working, and yet if we allow ourselves, like you say, that ability to just be lost and to be in the unknown, then beautiful things can sprout from that.
Yeah. And I didn't really allow it. I fought it. Who knows? Maybe I wouldn't have been there as long if I hadn't fought it so much. But I think for anybody listening, if you're there and you're fighting it, let that be okay. What I've learned. It's like whatever's actually happening, let that be what's happening. Don't even fight that.
Exactly.
That's when something does eventually come.
Yeah. Trusting that we are always in the perfect place, no matter what it looks like.
And yeah, and even when we're fighting it, we're doing exactly wrong compared to what all the spiritual teachers tell you it's supposed to be like.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, my teachers really helped me see that, you know, if there's one that's fighting it and there's one that's angry and there's one that's sad, just that's what's true.
Yeah.
And trying to make it be like, you know, that's not happening is just crazy making. So
Yeah.
it is what's happening.
Exactly. Okay, I want to touch quickly on, because I could talk about this forever with you, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the work you did after 9/11, and how you took your experiences and helped. Was it mostly 9/11 widows?
And well, you know, yes, because for two reasons. We were working with a nonprofit called Tuesday's Children, and their charter was to help children who'd been affected by 9/11. And so many of those children had been in utero,
Right.
or very young when their fathers passed away. And so it would make sense that initially for the first 5 years of their charter, they worked with the mothers, because the babies and children were too young to work with. So initially for 18 months, I was a coach, taught a little bit, but coached mostly from the West Coast as part of the 10-week course we were delivering to them. And then Tuesday's Children asked me to create a dating relationship course because I was a widow and I was in that process. So I, together with another woman who was divorced and had blended a family, we created something called From Alone to Alive. Mm. It was really beautiful. I commuted every other week, and it was a 3-part class. And we taught it a number of times over 18 months. And really, the end of it wasn't to have people dating. It was really more to help open women to just the reality that they are alive, that it's okay to want to be alive and to live again. Mm-hmm. The grief, how to date with the grief.
Yeah, yeah, wow.
Done, but to find people that are okay with being with you in your grief, because that's ultimately who you would want to spend your life with, mm-hmm. Really. So it was really beautiful, and it was those, you know, I remember during that time so many articles were coming out really sort of characterizing 9/11 widows. Mm-hmm. And I remember just being so hurt by that in a sense, not personally, but just noticing how far off base those things were, how sometimes we try to take one or two instances and spread it across a group of people. But I found the women to be beautiful, beautiful human beings who knew that they had children to raise still, knew they had their own grief, and really, this is a key point, because it was such a national thing, you know, that they needed to have their own grief. Yeah. It wasn't a public grief.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking about hearing about judgments of certain of the widows for moving on too quickly or whatever the judgment was, and just thinking too that is such an indication of how we judge grief in our culture.
Yeah,
and how there is supposed to be a right way to do it, and there just isn't. There just isn't.
No, there isn't. There isn't. And the importance of having your own personal, private grief.
Yeah.
Cannot be, I think that's so important to for all of us to note.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially anytime there's a public event that provokes grief, because I think part of what happens in those instances is that we are, as a collective, we're given permission to grieve because our own grief comes up and it may not have been dealt with in a private way or in a complete way. It then comes up, and it's sort of that public outpouring of grief is so powerful because everyone is allowed to grieve. But then we tend to put our judgments on those who are having their private grief as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Such an interesting phenomena.
Grief is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's It's at the root of so much, because love is at the root of so much. Like you said at the beginning, they're two sides of the same thing, and they go together. And yet we want to push grief away. We don't want it to be a part of our experience. We want the love without the grief.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Possible.
We want life without death.
Yeah.
We want joy without unhappiness. You know, we want the light without the dark. We're funny beings that way, aren't we?
We sure are.
When we first started talking, we were laughing about what funny beings we are.
Exactly, yeah. Which is actually a perfect segue into my last couple of questions, because we are running out of time. I'll start with this one. What brings you the most joy right now in your life?
Simple moments. Simple moments. I'm dancing, if I'm with my grandchildren or my daughters, taking pictures of flowers, which you know I love, the sun and the wind on my face. I'm really noticing how much I just love simple moments.
Yeah, if anyone loves flower photography, I'm going to recommend that they check out your gallery, because they are stunning pictures.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to put a book together. I keep saying that, but I think I'm going to hire somebody to do it because I haven't had time. But
absolutely.
It'll be fun to do.
Yeah, they're beautiful. So if you could wave your magic wand and change anything about the world right now, what would that be?
Let me think. That's it would be a shift in how we value life. And the sacredness of all of life, and the planet, children, women, animals, men, everything. It would be that. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine even having a wand to wave and just suddenly have everybody wake up and say, oh my gosh, this life is so valuable. It is so sacred. What can I do to serve it?
Oh, you just made me teary.
I love that question.
Yeah, it's a beautiful... Oh, I love your answer. Okay, and my final question is, what is one fun, unique thing about you that many people wouldn't know, that you're willing to share?
I'm glad you put that little disclaimer in. Wow. I don't know. I share pretty much everything. I don't think people realize how intense I get on the dance floor. How intense, how vibrant, how alive, how happy, how so much moves through me on that dance floor. I guess that would be it. Yeah, I guess that would be it.
That's neat. I'd love to dance with you one day. That would be really amazing.
Let's make it happen.
Okay.
I would love that. I would love to share it with you, because it is a world that is so hard to describe. I had a teacher once say this, one of the teachers, she said she realized that the people that in her life that mattered most to her, like her parents and her friends, her partner, or whatever, had never danced with her. They knew nothing about the dancer in her. And I sat and I thought, wow, that's true for me. It's such a part of my life, and most of the people that are closest to me have never seen me dance.
Wow.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just really made me think about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a beautiful self-care practice and spiritual practice, but it also makes me think that sometimes we not necessarily hide, but just keep close some of the things that are so important to us.
Yeah. Well, and what the dance floor and the dance practice allows, it's like, it's hard to recreate that not on the dance floor.
Right.
Right? Because it takes the community, it takes the person playing the music, it takes the wave of the music, it takes a freedom that the dance floor allows for, that it's like, I don't know. I'm going to be giving a talk, and I may actually dance during part of the talk.
Ooh.
The first day of December, so we'll see. I might actually bring it out.
Ooh, that's exciting. That's really exciting.
I think it would be. So.
Yeah. All right. Okay, well, I need to let you go because I know you have somewhere you need to be. But thank you so, so much for being here, Julie. And I just adore and appreciate you and what you bring to the world. So thank you.
Thanks for asking me. It's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure being with you. And you asked some really good questions. I really loved it.
Great.
I learned a lot.
Good. Good. All right. So for everyone who's listening, please, if you are drawn to Julie at all, follow her. She is an amazing human being, and she's got some exciting things up her sleeve. So,
Thanks, hon. Okay. Bye.